Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Mark Driscoll. I head up the Sustainable Food Programme at a sustainability non-profit organisation called Forum for the Future. I've got more of an NGO background, so for the past 20 years plus, I've actually been working in the sustainability movement, the sustainable food movement, and the civil society movement more broadly. I've been at Forum for just about a couple of years now, previous to which I headed up at WWF UK's One Planet Food programme. So always looked at the food system quite systemically, believing you have to address the kind of key environmental and social impacts across the food value chain. And I suppose my experience is quite multifaceted. Within some of those civil society organisations, I did a lot of campaigning against many of those big food corporations with whom I now work with at Forum for the Future. I've also spent many a year working with governments or trying to work with governments, much to my frustration, trying to influence EU, UK food policy, and more latterly, I'm obviously working with some of the kind of big food businesses. I actually believe, you know, one of the challenges that the civil society movement confronts, particularly in the past, has been their lack of ability to actually collaborate between civil society organisations to address some of those key challenges that we confront within the food system, you know, around obesity, around sustainability, around resource constraints. And actually, it's only in the last few years that I've noticed a real shift, both in terms of professionalism and the appetite for civil society organisations to work more cohesively to address some of those challenges, whether it's tackling and challenging some of those kind of food businesses that we're talking about today. And in my view, civil society organisations have failed to work collaboratively, whether it's about influencing government policy or private sector policy. And actually, that's one of the kind of key fundamental challenges. We all are aware of some of the kind of key environmental and social challenges that we confront in the 21st century around ecosystem loss, obesity, health issues. And in my view, businesses are certainly part of the problem. Many of the big global corporations, the incumbents, are actually causing many of these problems through the kind of products or service innovations that they're offering. But at the same time, I firmly believe that they can be part of the solution. And actually, we have to, in some shape or form, work with some of those businesses that really do want to change and shape the external context with which they operate, really do want to improve the livelihoods of the 840 million globally that are suffering from hunger, or a further billion people suffering from malnutrition. They've got huge power and influence, and that's certainly part of the problem, both in terms of resource efficiency, sustainable sourcing, but actually how they communicate, how they influence and shape consumer behaviour is really, really important. And in my view, there should be no unsustainable products on supermarket shelves. There is innovation within some of the retailers who will only provide Marine Stewardship Council fish. There's no option around whether fish should be sustainable or not. And some of the businesses that we actually work with, if you go back in history, the examples of Unilever, worked with civil society organisations. At the time I was with WWF, setting up the Marine Stewardship Council, for example, that looked at the regulatory environment, looked at the kind of conditions and mechanisms required to push the frontiers and encourage their competitors around issues such as sustainable fish. Food corporations obviously are not the only answer. I believe that actually regulation, governments need to step up to the mark. I've been really frustrated through projects like, as Tim will know, green food projects, various other initiatives in the UK which have achieved diddly squat, in my view. And actually, I think the real leaders, many of the real leaders, lie within the business movement. There are lots of reasons why actually they're not progressing fast enough, in my view. So we're a global sustainability non-profit organisation, really working with governments, businesses and other organisations globally to address some of the kind of more complex sustainability challenges. These are some of the challenges that no one organisation can tackle alone. So we're very much in the view that actually collaboration and partnership is a really, really important way forward and part of the solution. Just for context, the Sustainable Food Programme, which I run and manage within Forum, we have a vision for a sustainable food future which gives everyone access to healthy, nutritious food within environmental limits. Actually puts sustainable nutrition, numbers of people nourished per unit area of land, front and centre of public and private sector policy, as opposed to the post-war paradigm of increasing tonnes per unit crop per area of land, which often can be empty calories, foods high in saturated fats, sugars, salts, etc. So driving nutritional outcomes, how food businesses transform food cultures, reconnect us to how and where we grow food, and what we call creating sustainable value networks. Value networks that really reward producers, that really engage consumers, move power and influence from the middle to both ends, to producers and consumers. And I'm not just talking about financial value, I'm talking about social and environmental value here. And we work with many, probably we have a network of about 130 organisations globally, the big, the bad and the ugly. Probably 40 or 50 of these organisations are food businesses. Some of the kind of big global organisations, but also some of the smaller innovators, disruptors with new and exciting business models, which actually have producers actually as their shareholders, so the likes of Cafe Direct. And we try and work with these businesses to explore some of those sustainable business models. We work in two ways. We work bilaterally, actually helping embed sustainability into the business DNA, if you like. In my view, the role of the CSR strategy in 5 or 10 years will be dead. So actually, in my view, sustainability, one of the challenges for many businesses is not external, it's internal. It's about how they can embed sustainability across the organisation. So I don't believe, actually, we should be having separate siloed CSR strategies. Sustainability, CSR, should be embedded across the businesses more generally, mandated right at the CEO level, but actually it's got to move beyond sustainability teams. Many of them appreciate and understand some of the challenges, but actually, in my view, we can't just work with CSR teams. It has to be embedded into the marketing teams, the chief financial officer, the CEO, and those are the people with whom we work with at Forum for the Future. We won't work on producing a lovely glossy document that could be a fig leaf in terms of greenwashing. We'll only work with organisations that really engage their senior leadership team. Otherwise, there's not the resources, there's not the backup, there's not the financial incentives to do anything about it. Somebody mentioned the disconnect between CSR and buying teams, for example. There's some lovely sustainable sourcing strategies. Unilever, PepsiCo's, Cokes all have lovely glossy sustainability strategies, but they mean diddly squat. Actually, unless you can incentivize, motivate the buying teams that actually make the decisions as to where and how they buy their produce. Actually, if buyers are incentivized based on profitability, nothing is going to change. And that's where senior leadership is required. So we do a lot of work embedding sustainability across business DNA. We do a lot of work pulling together pre-competitive collaborations to address some of those issues. And we use what we call futures as a key way of engaging with businesses. So through our Future Centre based in Singapore, we do a lot of work looking at the kind of key future trends, horizon scanning, signals of change. And actually, we use futures not just to think about the next 2 or 3 years, and traditionally and frustratingly, many businesses are very short-term in nature, but actually to challenge them a little bit. What are the kind of key trends? Many of them are illustrated on this slide that are going to impact on your business. And we work with not just corporations, but other organisations, civil society organisations, in 10, 15, 20 years, moving them on from the 2 or 3 year cycle of CSR strategies to think about the real kind of key strategic impacts that are going to impact on their business in 15 or 20 years. So we're passionate, actually, businesses should be able to create a vision in terms of their role in a sustainable food future, looking at trends and horizons as a key way of doing that, and managing some of the kind of risks and impacts, and actually starting to explore how they can operate in that kind of external context. These are some of the things that we've identified on the horizon that many businesses should be dealing with. At Forum, we believe there are a number of factors which are piling on the pressure, which means businesses have to change if they're to survive. Increasing pressure. We've heard many of these around inequality, the haves and have-nots, the 840 million people suffering from hunger, yet still low expectations. Many of you in this room have talked around the importance of governance, the role of governments. To be honest, I haven't seen government stepping up to the mark, both nationally and internationally. So where is that leadership going to come from? Certainly I don't see it. The issues of ultra-transparency, brands in the firing line, huge change in consumer expectations, particularly in Southeast Asia, resource constraints. And there are a few emerging responses to solutions. Actually, the circular economy. Increasingly, businesses are looking at the role of the circular economy, valuing waste, food security and healthy, sustainable diets. As Tim knows, this is an area I'm passionate about through WWF and Live Well. Actually, businesses need to innovate, new product and service innovation. We work with the PepsiCos of this world through their CSR strategy, but fundamentally their model is really, really challenged. We can't, in 15, 20 years, sell products high in sugars. Otherwise, they'll be the next Kodak. Kodak didn't survive because it failed to move into the digital age. From my perspective, you know, lots of the solutions around multi-stakeholder initiatives. I've been engaged when I was in WWF on palm oil and fish. Actually, we need to push some of these businesses further and faster, moving from commodities to what I call sustainable landscapes, where sustainable agriculture is mainstreamed, ecosystems are restored, and livelihoods are improved. And actually, is it good enough for businesses to reduce their impact on the environment? Should we not be challenging them further and faster? Should they be actually restorative businesses, actually putting back more than they take? I would argue that isn't really important, because actually, unless we do, we've got a pending social and ecological crisis over the next 10 to 15 years. New approaches, so moving beyond constraints of shareholder value. Often businesses, there has to be a business case. That's often based on differentiation, shared costs, reputational gains, long-term solutions and leadership. But I think there's also a moral and ethical case too. And actually, businesses need to move beyond just the case in terms of financial value, but to improving societal outcomes too. Business leaders, I think, need to be doing two things. Innovating, so through new product and service innovation, but actually shaping the external context in which they operate. The Cokes actually need to be collaborating with the PepsiCos. The Diageos need to be collaborating with the Heinekens to address, for example, water as a shared risk. Actually, yes, businesses have influenced regulatory policies, probably negatively, but actually, if there's real leadership here, can that be twisted and turned around? So actually we can work with businesses to influence the regulatory framework in which they operate through the Millennium or Sustainable Development Goals as they now are, for example. And basically we should be pushing businesses as system innovators. So moving from single sole material issues to system-wide understanding, moving from this short-term incremental step-by-step approach to more systemic pioneering interventions, actually from trying to solve it alone to collaboration and partnership, philanthropy, advocacy campaigns to new structures. At Forum, we do a lot of work in terms of leadership. Very briefly, we also do a lot of work in terms of actually pulling together businesses with civil society organisations and other collaborative partnerships. So the last couple of years, for example, we pulled together 40 organisations representing some of the big tea manufacturing sectors with civil society organisations to address some of the challenges faced by the tea sector. Here we work to understand some of the kind of producer organisations and more importantly, create that shared vision and understanding for sustainable tea sector, but to implement actions to address some of those challenges. So, for example, the tea sector is based on a very conservative historical auction house system in terms of how tea is purchased that gives their suppliers no guarantee in terms of the price, therefore no incentive to really plant tea products, tea crops for the long term, invest in community, invest in social infrastructure. That has to change if actually the tea sector ensures a kind of long-term security. The other project just to touch on, for example, one of the key challenges of the 21st century we've just launched actually in the last month is something called the Protein Challenge. So here we've pulled together 40 or 50 organisations, a core group, a steering group of 8 organisations. So the retail sector in the US and UK, Target, Waitrose, food manufacturers like Corn, civil society organisations like WWF, to explore how we can optimise nutritional outcomes whilst reducing key environmental impacts from the production and consumption of protein. Actually, what is the right balance of different protein sources to feed a burgeoning population with changing diets? How can we innovate around this? What is the role for the investment community? What is the role for the academic community? We play the role as a non-profit organisation of an independent facilitator and convener. We get some money from the businesses involved, but we always ensure that we are neutral and challenging and serve as a critical friend. And I actually believe there is a role for civil society organisations to play in challenges such as this one. 3 minutes, some of the kind of key ingredients for business change. Actually, it is about building a shared understanding of trust. It's about understanding how the business operates A lot of CSR is not about what they do, it's about how they operate, it's about the governance. It's moving from short-term to long-term thinking, embedding sustainability across the organisation, transparency, new business models. And that's a fly-through.
Very good. Okay.